Okay, well, God bless everyone. Glad that you're here tonight. So blessed to be able to share the word with you as we get into these wonderful foundations in Genesis this Thursday, February 13th, 2025. Last week we studied the details of Jacob leaving Laban, and boy, was that full of interesting stuff. We found out what kind of man Laban was. He was not only Jacob's father-in-law, he was also his uncle. And we know how he got 7 years of labor out of him to get Rachel, and he switched Leah in the dark of night, and then whoops, and then he gets Jacob wants Rachel and has to work another 7 years for her, and then after another 6 years, he finally says hasta la vista, and we saw how that Jacob wanted some stuff for his house. So all he wanted was the speckled and the streaked spotted lambs and sheep. And Uncle Laban said, good deal. And then he hit them all before Jacob could get them. He's 3 days away is where they were. But God saw all this stuff and took care of it. So he fed those animals, put these different kinds of branches in the water. And next thing you know, you get all these spotted speckled sheep. And not only that, they breed prolifically. And he's now got a whole mess of these sheep. So he ducks out and without Laban knowing, and then Laban feigns that he's offended because he snuck out. I would have thrown a big party for you. You know me. I love you. All that kind of stuff. Yeah, right. So anyhow, he ducks out of town. He takes, so that's not the end of it. Laban catches up with Laban in Gilead, and then they kind of have some harsh words and, all these different things. But it was a wonderful example of how Jacob handled the situation. I think he did really well. How he stood up, he was honest with Laban, laid it out what he did. And so finally they came to the conclusions that they would make a covenant. And Jacob put up his second standing stone. Remember, the first one was in Bethel. Now he does another one, and they agree never to cross the line there. And so that agreement was made. Laban kissed his 11 grandsons, his one granddaughter, if you remember her name, Diana. She's not often mentioned when they list out the sons, but he did have a daughter. Kissed them and kissed his two daughters, Leah and Rachel. And guess who he didn't kiss? He didn't kiss Jacob. At least he wasn't in the list of who got kisses. So they parted company. Jacob and his crew head south, and that's where we get into it tonight. So let's take a look at. I got a couple. There's a couple more background things I want to see, but we're going to get into Genesis 32 tonight. You can turn to that if you want to. You remember back in Genesis 27, I'm going to share my screen. I'll be sharing the Revised English Version, and I've taken excerpts and different things from a variety of sources, including the internet, but the REV commentary, as well as, thanks to Claire, Dennis Prager's book, Commentary on Genesis, which is very insightful. So let's take a quick look. I'm going to share my screen. And let's see here.
Yay, Claire.
Hey, Claire. All right, so we're in Genesis. I'm going to go to 27 first. If you got your finger, we're going to be right back to 32, but just a couple of reminders. In 36 here, this is after Jacob and his mom, Rebecca, plotted to steal his blessing. And Esau says, isn't he rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, actually bought it for a bowl of lentil stew. And look, now he's taken away my blessing. And he said, haven't you received a blessing from me? That's what he's saying. No, I'm sorry. This is where Esau's talking to his dad again. But you can see there's not a lot of goodwill after this last event. Let's go on down to 41. Then Esau held a grudge against Jacob because the blessing with which his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, "The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." So that's when the rest of the record shows where Rebecca decides that, oh, she's going to tell her husband Isaac, hey, these wives of Esau are driving me up the wall. If Jacob marries them, what am I going to do with my life? And so she plots this, hatches this plan to send off Jacob to Haran to find a wife, when in fact she's trying to get him out of town because Esau's after him. So her conniving and stuff is well recorded in the Bible, and God exposes this stuff over and over again. And we're talking about the Christ line here. It's interesting that these kinds of people, with all their frailties and their sin nature, it shows up. But God continues to work with people. So we are not beyond his grace and mercy. It's a great thing to think about when you see how he worked with them. He works with us. Sometimes we get out in left field, and he just never gives up on us. So now we're going to get into the record in 32 verse 1. So we've got 20 years have passed, and Jacob's still wondering. Now it's been 20 years, maybe Esau's cooled down, but Jacob's got some second thoughts. And he's thinking, I don't know, it's been 20 years. So we're going to find out how he prepares to meet Esau, because he wants to reconcile with his brother, which is a very good thing. And Jacob went on his way. This is after they put that standing stone up there in Gilead, and Laban, went back home, and Jacob's heading south back to his home area. So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. Well, angels, these aren't people, these are real angels. And so what we're finding here, that this is we're going to find out this is called the camp. So we got these angels that meet him. And in verse 2, it says, when he saw them, Jacob said, this is God's camp. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim, which means like two camps. So meaning two camps, the angels are camping here. This is a good sign. And now my camp is here. That makes two. So that's why he named it, that area, that particular word, Mahanaim. So we've got this going on. And these before he was camped with Laban, and they had two camps, and they were hostile camps. Now he's moving away from Gilead, and he comes across these angels. So now he says there are two camps. One is God's camp, which is the camp of the angels, and now he's got his camp. So meeting some of these angels, that was probably pretty comforting to him. He's been stressed out with different things, not getting along with his in-laws, and having put in 20 years and had to fight to get stuff for his own family. And now he's thinking about reconciling with his brothers. So he's got a lot on his mind, and this is very comforting to see that God has not forsaken him. There's a camp of angels there. And in verse 3, Jacob sent messengers ahead of him. Now he's planning, he's getting really focused. He's got some good comfort. He's been validated by God. God has not forsaken him. He's got angels there. And so he sends messengers ahead of him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, the territory of Edom. So we know about this, the Edom, because this was part of a prophecy. So let's continue. We'll probably get into more of that later. So we've got Esau there in the land of Edom. And I'm going to show a map here in a minute, and we'll take a look so you can see where that's at. But God shows him that he's always going to be with him. Let's look at the next verse here. And he commanded them in verse 4. Well, first of all, I'm going to show you this map. Let me do that. Okay, so here we've got a map of which is called, it's going to be called Israel pretty quick now, but this is the land of Canaan. And way up here is Haran. And then we see one of the journeys down here. These are the journeys of Jacob when he goes to Haran and back, because he had to go up there to get his wife. Now he's here. Now look here. This is
AJ,
okay, now
I'm
here.
not seeing a map.
Oh, you're not seeing a map?
No.
I thought
Anyone
I'm
else?
I'm going to stop sharing a minute. I am sharing. Let
I
me share
couldn't see
again.
it either.
Okay, let me try again.
Ah,
It is.
Do you
Good.
see it now?
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
that looks
all
like
right.
a map.
I guess it was needed to be done twice. Okay, so here we are. We have the map of Canaan. As I was saying, the Great Sea is the Mediterranean Sea. Up here is Haran, Padam Aram, which is an area of interest because of Abraham and Rebecca and Rachel and Laban. That's where they were. And then we have here in Gilead, this is where Laban chases to try to get to Jacob. This is where the standing stone is here in Gilead. And you can see there's a Sea of Galilee to get your perspective. So Gilead is over here. And Peniel is going to show up here in a little bit. But I wanted to show you Edom. This is Edom. So Edom is down, here's the Dead Sea. And Edom is down here. So that's where you can see this blue line. This is where Esau is going to be coming from here in a little bit to meet with his brother, who's now heading out of Gilead, and he's going to be crossing over the Jordan here in a little bit. But well, I don't want to get ahead of that. So we're going to see that in just a moment. So I'll stop sharing here, and we might come back to that map again. I'm going to go back to the REV text here. So you can see that okay, right, guys? I can't see you, but that's okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, so he comes, so his brother in the land of Seir, the territory of Edom, and he commanded them saying, this is what you are to say to Esau. So Jacob's talking to his group, his crew. And this is what I want you to say to my Lord Esau. He's showing some respect. Esau is technically the older brother by seconds or minutes. You know, they're twins. This is what your servant Jacob says. I have sojourned in the land of Laban and stayed here until now. And that's kind of a nice thing to say because he's giving him kind of an excuse. You know, I've been up here for a long time, and you know that's kind of why I didn't get in touch with you. And so, and he also wants to know he's coming in peace. And so I want to quote here a guy named Machmanides. I got this from the Dennis Prager commentary. This is a Jewish scholar who lived back in the 1200s. This is a long time ago. Now, and this is what he says. Jacob was showing Esau deference, as if the sale of his birthright meant nothing to him, nothing to Jacob. He was still acting toward Esau as the firstborn, as the older brother, trying to remove the hatred that was in his brother's heart that we saw back in Genesis 27. So then he says, this is what he's continuing to have his people say. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants and female servants. I have sent to tell my Lord in order to find favor in your eyes. This is that deference he's showing. He really is coming with a kind heart, and he's giving gifts. And so that's what's going on. So let's go into verse 6 here. Now, the messengers returned to Jacob. Now, he had sent these messengers that we just read about. He sent them to Edom, which we just read about. Now, Edom is probably from Gilead. It's about 90 miles, depending on what part of Edom. So we're going to say 90 miles there, 90 miles back. That's 180 miles. So we can assume that these messengers, which could travel fast because they don't have livestock and kids and stuff, could probably do that in a week or two. So we got some time. Now we're going to hear what the messengers say. The messengers returned to Jacob saying, we came to your brother Esau, And furthermore, he is coming to meet you, and there are 400 men with him. That can be a little bit scary. That's a whole lot of guys, because if you recall, Abraham took about 318 men to defeat all those kings to get his nephew Lot back. And so there's, this is a sizable army. So this is going to cause a little bit of duress here. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and was distressed. And so what am I going to do? So he divides the people who were with him and the flocks and the herds and the camels into two camps. He's got a strategy going here. I'm going to put them in two separate camps. And he said, if Esau comes into the one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left, that'll escape. He's got a plan. So if he comes and gets us, he's not going to get everybody and everything. So pretty good strategy, looks like. And so let's go on to verse 9. And Jacob said, now let's listen to this prayer. This is a guy who stole the blessing. He bought the birthright with lentils. He connived with his mother to act like he was his brother. This is the guy now, and he's going to pray a prayer. And listen to this prayer. Jacob said, God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Yahweh, who said to me, return to your land and to your relatives, and I will do good things for you. I am not worthy of all the faithfulness and all the steadfastness that you have shown to your servant. For with just my staff, I passed over this Jordan, and now I have become two camps. What a beautiful prayer. This shows a lot of maturity. Jacob has grown. He's grown. It just shows a lot of growth. After buying his brother's birthright for the lentils and plotting with his mother and dealing with Laban, now it's 20 years later, we see that things have changed in his heart. The prayer is honest, humble, simple, and his praise is not only for himself, he brings in his family. Before, he is fairly selfish, so he might have left it out. And he remembers, he reminds God about the covenant. So a beautiful prayer here, and God's going to hear it, and had heard it. So in verse 10, we read about that, showing the humbleness of his heart. And then verse 11, please, he continues, deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I am afraid that he will come and strike me and the mothers with the children. So that's just a wonderful prayer. Verse 12, but you yourself said, now he reminds God of stuff that God said. You'll see Moses doing this later on. We can do this because God is faithful. What he says he's going to do, he's going to do. And when we bring up and remind him, that tells us and him that we trust God, that he's going to do it. This is a wonderful phrase of trust. You said yourself, I will do good things for you. Yes, good things, and make your seed as the sand of the sea, which is too numerous to count. So if Esau comes and wipes them out, that's going to make that promise difficult. In verse 13, so he stayed there that night, and from what he had within him, he took a present for Esau, his brother. Now we're going to talk about this present. Go on. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their calves, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 2 female donkeys, and 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. He gave them into the hands of his servants, each herd by itself, and said to his servants, cross over ahead of me and put a space between herd and herd. The word herd usually refers just to livestock in a generic way. Flock normally is used in conjunction with goats and sheep, but he's using herds because we're talking about a mix of livestock. So he's got this wonderful gift that I mean, in today's standards, that's a fabulous gift. I mean, that is lots of money, even today's standards. So this is what he's got. Now, you notice the word cross over ahead of me and put a space between herd and herd. Okay, this gives us an indication of where he is. So I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the map. Let me pull that up and I'll see if it comes on right away. Hopefully it will this time. And if it's not there, please let me know. Otherwise, it's going to work this time. Yeah, it's
Yeah, good.
okay. So he had to cross over a river, and the river here that we're talking about is going to be this is kind of blurry. The seas at Gilead, and then these other words, this Peniel is going to come up. This is the river. See, there's the Jordan River, and this is another river that he had to cross before he had to cross the Jordan. So this gives you an idea where he's at, kind of helps. And this is a great map because it even refers to some of the scriptures that we have been looking at. So there's a river there that's on the east side of the Jordan, and he would normally go south over that. And he's talking about that river. And we're going to go back and get back into or here. And he's telling them to cross over the river. And we can see he's dividing his large group. Right now, you see two, but eventually it's going to be three groups. We'll see the first group contain the animals, the gifts of the animals, and the gifts of the servants, and his two concubines. The second had Leah, and the last one's going to have Rachel. And this will come to light here as we get into it. So, verse 17, and he commanded the first group, saying, when Esau, my brother, meets you and asks you, saying, to whom do you belong? You see, well, why would he ask that? Well, the first group is normally, if you're going to go out to battle, my understanding is, according to their culture, you put your slaves and your servants out there in front of the crowd. And so that's why you would ask whom you belong and where are you going? And to whom do these herds ahead of you belong? So we've got this first group, and he's talking to the servants. And in verse 13, the servants were obedient to the commands of Jacob, and they said, they are your servant Jacob's. It is a present sent to my Lord, to Esau. And look, he himself is behind us. So he is trying to appease any hostility here. And this is, a wonderful gift. And so that's what's going on. And the servants did what was commanded, which was really cool. Let's go into the next verse, verse 20. And you are to say, furthermore, your servant is behind us. And that's what he said. Whoops, I think I jumped. I jumped. Yeah, let me see here. So this is the first group, and that's what he told them. And they are your servant Jacob's. It is a present from my Lord to Esau, and love himself. And he also, and he also commanded the second and third groups and all that walk behind the herd, saying, this is how to speak to Esau when you come to him. So he's giving information to all of these groups, all three groups. And you are to say, furthermore, look, your servant Jacob is behind us, for he said, I will appease him with the present that goes before me, and afterwards I will see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. So here he gives all the coaching. I'm sorry, I got that mixed up a little bit. He gives all the coaching to the first group, to the second group, and the third group. So everybody knows what they're supposed to say. He didn't want to leave anything to that might be the wrong way to say stuff that would somehow sabotage his desire to make amends with his older brother. And so he was clear in what he wanted. And so here we go. Then we talked about the crossing. So the gift crossed over the Jabbok River ahead of him, where he himself stayed that night in the camp. And he arose during the night, in verse 23, and took his two wives, that would be Leah and Rachel, and two female slaves, that will be Bilhah and Zilpah. These were the two slave girls which he had 4 of his 11 sons with. And he took his 11 sons, and of course, you know, Dinah's there, and crossed over the ford of Jabbok. This is that river I just showed you on the map. So this section isn't real clear. It looks like he probably, escorted the groups one by one. He probably took the first group over, came back, got the second, then came back and got the third. Because it says he took them and brought them across the stream and brought across whatever he had. So there's some back and forth here. But as he gets them all across the stream, somewhere along the line, it's not real clear, he's going to be by himself. So he's probably on the south side now with the rest of the group, but they are ahead of him, and it ends up him being by himself. And verse 24, and Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him coming to dawn. And we know this is an angel. And now if at first, if Jacob knows that, we're not sure. And so they're having this wrestling, and this is pretty interesting because the wrestling shows that there was physical contact, especially with the fact that the angel asked Jacob to let him go. We're going to see that. And so until the coming dawn, we're going to see about this. Jacob was left alone, man wrestled with him until the coming dawn. And just to bring this up again, we've seen this a lot throughout the Bible. Oftentimes things have 2 meanings. Remember when Judas left that night when he betrayed Jesus, and he left during the night, and it also indicates he also walked into darkness. Not only is it a physical darkness, but a spiritual darkness. And now this could be indicating that after they wrestled, and this was a physical wrestle, some of these words, if you check them out, wrestle could mean like in dust. There's dust involved, there's rolling around. They wrestled. I know this is bizarro, an angel wrestling with a man. But then as the coming dawn, something's starting to change. Not only with the light coming, but there's something else on the horizon, it seems. And when he saw that he did not prevail, now this is the angel. Now this is just, again, this is interesting here, because when the angel, saw that the angel, did not prevail against him, Jacob, the angel, struck the socket of his hip. And the socket of Jacob's hip was strained as he wrestled with him. Now, some would say, some translations, I think King James says dislocated. But it seems that this socket is the socket of the hip that's connected to the thigh. It could be that he had, a strain in that hip socket and thigh area. And because if he actually had a dislocated hip, he's going to be in a very bad way. He's not going to get up. You don't get up with a hip that's out of socket, like a dislocated shoulder or dislocated hip. So then the angel says to Jacob, let me go, for dawn has come. Now, what does that mean? Did the angel want not to be seen closely? Don't know. But Jacob said, I won't let you go unless you bless me. Okay. Now it's interesting that Jacob wants a blessing. Before, he was sneaky about getting a blessing from his father Isaac. Now he's asking for a blessing. And so that's what he's going to do. And then in verse, and not only did he ask for a blessing, he says, what is your name? And he said to him, what is your name? And Jacob says, Jacob. And he said, your name will no longer be called Jacob. So now this is a profound area here, because this is going to change everything going forward, at least for the most part. He says his name Jacob, from you will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. because you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. So Israel has its meaning in struggling. He gets this new name, and the meaning of this word, they debate about it. Some just say struggle with God. Others say rule with God or strive with God. But we do know that there was a struggle here and there was a fight. And we also know that he struggled with men, his brother. He struggled with Laban. So he has struggled with men and he's prevailed. He's come out ahead. And here the angel let him win. This is interesting, and it leaves some question. But what I can see is that the angel fought with him and he let him win. The angel could have taken him out. There's no match. But this is what happened. And so now we go on. Jacob asked him. Now, so I've told you my name. Now he asked the angel to tell him his name. And then the angel says, well, why is it that you asked for my name? Now, this is interesting too, because if you look at other parts of the Bible, asking names can be, sometimes people don't like to, angels don't, others. Let's take a quick look here at, I'm going to go back into Judges. And if you can hold your place here, we're going to be back. And Judges, we're going to look in verse 13. I'm going to read a part of that verse. I'm sorry, chapter 13, verse 18. The angel of Yahweh said to him, why do you ask about my name, since it's wonderful? So there's something about names that's very interesting. That's in Revelation. Jesus has a name too, that in Revelation 19, let's take a quick look at that. Revelation 19. That sometimes there's this kind of thing where if you know someone's name, you almost have a certain advantage or power. If a stranger comes by you and says, hey, Vicky, and you've never seen the person before, there's kind of that odd feeling of, how does he know me? And gives you a little bit of concern, almost like he's got an upper hand on you. So the angel doesn't tell him. But let's take a look in Revelation 19:12. Verse 12, and his eyes were aflame. I think I'm in the right verse here. 19:12. And his eyes were aflame, and his head were many diadems, and he has a name written that no one knows but he himself. So we've got this thing about names. So I'm not trying to make a big deal out of it, but you kind of wonder, why didn't the angel tell him? He didn't. So this also tells us, just because you're asking a question, you don't have to answer it. I was really bad at this. I used to think I had to make a comment about everything said. I had to answer every question I was asked. And here's a good example. The angel doesn't. And so, but he goes on with the blessing. And so he does end up blessing Jacob. And this is a big deal. I know a lot of us in our writings, when we see each other, God bless you, that is significant. Now, it doesn't mean just what it does. It's not just words that have no meaning, but there's significance. And we can see that Jacob's life was successful. As you go forward, he lived to be very old. And all of his kids survived him. None of his kids died before he did. And that's a real blessing, to never lose a child. And he lived to see them grow and become prosperous. They're in Egypt, they really expanded. So he did live a blessed life, and the angel did bless him there. And Jacob called the place Peniel. And I showed you that on the map. That's right next there to that river. And because he said, I have seen God's face to face. And it's not a surprise to know that Peniel means face of God. And of course, he did not see him, and yet my life has been spared. Now we got some, Eastern ways of looking things. Jacob knew that he had seen a representative of God. He hadn't seen God himself, but he saw a representative of God, and yet his life has been spared. And they had this feeling, and it's going to be brought up later when we get into Genesis, when Moses wanted to see God, and God says, you can't see me, the fullness of me, all of me, and survive it. So he just showed him a part. We know that Abraham saw God in how God wanted to be seen as a man when he came down with the two angels. We read about that not long ago. Others have seen God. There's probably 7 or 8, maybe 10. I don't know the number of God showing himself to people. When Stephen was stoned, the heavens opened up. There was God. There was Jesus, saw God. When Ezekiel was in captivity, the chariot throne of God showed up. There's God with the rainbow, all the colors. Oftentimes he's dressed in white, gold, lots of colors. So God shows up. And in this case, as an angel, as a representative, it's very common that we know that the principle can be represented by a representative. So the sun rose up on him as he crossed by. And this is just another, I don't know, they had 2 different spellings. It's kind of unusual that so closely they'd spell it 2 different ways, but this is the same place. And he was limping because of his hip, that thigh area, that hip. He was limping. Now, did he limp the rest of his life? Most likely not. But at that time, he just had an injury and he's limping. Therefore, this is very interesting. In verse 12, to this day, the children of Israel do not eat the tendon of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he struck Jacob's hip socket at the tendon of the thigh. Now, I thought that was pretty interesting, because I want to read something here from Dennis Prager's commentary. He said, and I quote this, to this day, kosher butchers remove the sciatic nerve from the meat here. And certain definitions say this tendon could be a nerve. It could be translated that way. But anyhow, kosher butchers, they remove it. And this practice is an example of the centrality of physical signs and rituals in the Torah and in Jewish tradition. So, and the cool thing is that we see these standing rocks. We see these. We see these standing rocks. We're going to see places where they stack up rocks here and there, and you see these things. This is done very commonly by God, so to help people remember stuff. And can you imagine? Like the Passover, you eat certain things at a certain way. You eat bread that's not leavened. And then this situation now with the tendon here, where they remove that nerve, the kids are going to say, well, why was that removed? Or the parents will teach that it was removed. And so they'll say, why? And the parents will teach them. And then their kids will teach them. And you pass down these wonderful records of the Bible, and you have these keys to remembering, because you just couldn't go down to the Bible bookstore and pick up a scroll. The way you knew what God said was you had to remember it, and had to be repeated over and over again. And they needed tools to help them remember. When they made covenants, they didn't sign documents and keep track of it. They say, remember when we had that feast? Remember when the animals were cut? Remember this? Because these are significant events that you don't easily forget. So this is another thing that you see. So I think that's pretty interesting. And I've got some more here, but let me check my time. I don't have Doug's clock to look at. We're getting close to 8. We're getting close to 8. So I'm going to leave you in suspense. I've got these first 11 verses that are going to tell you. You can read ahead if you want to. But this is going to start to tell you how the meeting goes. And it's good. It's really good. The reconciliation is good. It's kind of like, remember when Joseph was in Egypt, and then the brothers kind of showed up. That's one of the most moving stories, I think, in forgiveness. And when Joseph just cried, when they came back with his dad and Benjamin, his little brother, these wonderful stories of forgiveness. And this will be another one. So we'll get that. And remember, we're still talking about 11 sons, right? You know who's missing, don't you? Yep, my little baby Benjamin hasn't shown up yet. And that's going to be a little bit of a sad story, but we'll get into it. So Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus Christ, thank you for this time together in your word. Thank you for the blessing it is to be able to share it, to see these things, and to see how you love people and how you deal with them wherever they're at. So I ask you to bless this group tonight. Thank you for healing, wholeness, forgiveness of sins, protection from the adversary, everything we need, a great night's sleep, a wonderful week ahead of us, and for tomorrow being special for all as we celebrate Valentine's Day here and others in other countries as well, that it be a blessing to everybody. So thank you for your love, your goodness, and tenderness tonight. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Is there any discussion after, or you just?